Dear class, in the last course, we learned the changes of Chinese education from tradition to modern times and saw the different historical missions it shouldered in different times. Mission, 使命, 使命. Historical mission, 历史使命, 历史使命. For many times, education has taken the changes of times and has become an important force for Chinese culture to continue and develop. To continue, 延续, 延续. To develop, 发展, 发展. And today, we are going to focus on Wenzhou, where I live, and take a look at of the glory and revival of education in this city. Glory, 荣光, 荣光. Revival, 复兴, 复兴. Speaking of Wenzhou, people will usually go, wow, Wenzhou people are really good at business. Its economy is so well developed and its people are so rich. Indeed, after the reform and opening up, Wenzhou people have accumulated abundant capital with their wisdom and diligence, as well as their spirit of bravery. Capital, 资本, 资本. The rapid rise up has attracted many scholars to study why Wenzhou became wealthy first and why Wenzhou people rise up, 崛起, 崛起. Of course, the reasons are numerous. Today, let's look at it from the perspective of education to answer the question, why Wenzhou? As is often said, one side of the soil and water raises one side of the people. Some experts believe that the spiritual core of Wenzhou people comes from the Yongjia school, who advocate the spirit of pragmatism. Expert, 专家, 专家. Pragmatism, 经世致用, 经世致用. Yongjia school, 永嘉学派. So today, let's start with a short video to see what Yongjia school. There are a few terms we need to learn in the video. 重实, 崇尚实际, to worship practical things. 重实, 重实. 重商, 重视商业, mercantile, 重商. 理学, or in English, Neo-Confucianism, and 心学 are also Confucian schools, which are still very influential to this day. 状元, the first prized scholar in the imperial examination is called 状元. Remember, in the last class, we mentioned that after the Song dynasty, the imperial examination system could only be held once every 3 years. And 状元 is the scholar who ranks the first place in the country in the triennial examination, which is a very rare honor. As you can see, the core ideology of Yongjia school bore the responsibility of changing the manners and morals of the time through education during the war-torn Thousand Song dynasty. However, in the long Ming and Qing dynasties, the capitals of the country returned to the north, and the two Confucian theories of the New Confucianism and the Xin Xue became the standard answers in the imperial examinations again. Thus, Yongjia School gradually declined. Decline, 式微, 式微. But in modern times, especially after the Opium War, questioning traditional Chinese education, a group of scholars in the South raised the banner of Yongjia School again and promoted the idea of pragmatism. Remember, it was under the guidance of the idea of pragmatism that a large number of new schools were established and became the main force of China's educational reform. In addition to inheriting the Yongjia spirit, the evidence of the diversification and internationalization of Wenzhou's education can also be found in the modern history of the city. Let's meet an important foreigner, William Edward Zuccio, whose Chinese name is Su Huilian. Born in Britain in 1861, William Edward Zuccio was a missionary who came all the way to China to preach. He was also a sinologist specializing in the translation and introducing of Chinese classics. A one-man founder of churches, schools, and hospitals in China. In his later years, he became a professor of sinology at Oxford University. In 1876, after the Sino-British Treaty of Yantai, Wenzhou became a trading port, opening up to the world. Zuccio was sent to Wenzhou in such a historical background. Among the missionaries who came to Zhejiang, Zuccio was a man of extraordinary ability. First of all, he is incredibly talented. Talent, 天赋, 天赋. He received no college education, but a secondary school education. Before he came to Wenzhou, his understanding of the Chinese language only limited to a short training course in Oxford for only a few days. Oxford, 牛津, 牛津. But he can speak Wenzhou dialect 6 months after he came to Wenzhou. Wenzhou dialect is extremely difficult to learn, and though with all the modern learning tools available today, I have hardly met anyone whose mother tongue is not Wenzhou dialect who can learn it in half a year. Your teacher, I have been in Wenzhou for 5 years, and I can only understand the 4 words in Wenzhou dialect. 宇宙达悟 dialect, 方言, 方言. Let's take a brief look at what Zuccio had left in Wenzhou. In 1882, he created the Wenzhou pinyin characters according to the pronunciation rules of Wenzhou dialect, replacing Chinese characters with Latin pinyin and translated the Bible with Wenzhou pinyin. Bible in Chinese is 圣经, 圣经. In 1887, Zuccio opened a small private school in Kailefang, teaching Confucius classics and Bible. It was the predecessor of Wenyi Primary School today. In 1897, he rented a house in Voucher to open an academy, which later became Wenzhou Mochi Primary School. In 1897, Zuccio ran the Dingli Hospital, which was the earliest Western hospital in southern Zhejiang province, creating a modern medical system in Wenzhou. In 1898, Chenxi Chapel, the Wenzhou Chenxi Church, was built. It was the largest church in southern Zhejiang of the time. In the autumn of 1903, the Arts Academy was built, which was the first higher education school in Wenzhou. At the opening ceremony, important government officials at that time, Sun Yiran, the master of Confucian classics, and Timothy Richard, who once served as the president of Beijing College of Combined Learning, all came to extend their congratulations. In the schools founded by Zuccio, students learned to speak English. After graduation, they could find a well-paid job in the customs or trading companies. Although the names of the schools founded by him are no longer in existence, many substitute schools under his influence still exist today. Later, William Edward Zuccio left Wenzhou. In 1906, he served as a president of Shanxi Grammar School, which was one of the only 3 public universities in China of that time, and the other 2 were the Imperial University of Peking and Imperial Tianjin University. During his tenure, he translated the most important theory of Confucianism, the Analects of Confucius, into English. His version of translation is the most recognized classic translation by Oxford University and has been printed in more than 30 editions. In 1911, Zuccio left China, returned to Britain to raise money to found the Huazhong College. However, the sudden outbreak of the First World War completely failed his plan. Raise money in Chinese is 筹款, 筹款. In 1920, Zuccio was employed as a professor of sinology at Oxford University, where he translated the Lotus Sutra and wrote a dictionary of Chinese Buddhist terms. The latter is by far the most useful English reference book in the field of Buddhist studies. Since the 1920s, all first-class intellectuals of China visiting Oxford were received by Zuccio, such as Cai Yuanpei, the first president of Peking University, Hu Shi, the Minister of Education of the Republic of China, and so on. In 1929, an American guy named John King Fairbank, Fei Zhenqing in Chinese, came to Britain and wanted to learn Chinese from William Edward Zuccio, who suggested that he go to China to research and study Chinese, and introduced him to Liang Sichen, an equally young scholar of the time. His Chinese name, Fei Zhenqing, was chosen by Liang Sichen's wife, Lin Huiying. The world fell into the Cold War after the Second World War. Cold War, 冷战, 冷战. Fairbank and other American scholars who had studied and lived in China strongly urged the government to re-examine its relations with China. With his efforts and advice, Kissinger paid a visit to China in 1972, which greatly promoted the normalization of Sino-US relations. John King Fairbank's contribution has no direct relation to Wenzhou, of course. But in retrospect, all this can be back to the Wenzhou where William Edward Zuccio had once lived and made achievements. Now, I'd like to draw your attention back to Wenzhou University. As an outsider, I can feel the striving spirit of Wenzhou people whenever thinking of the founding history of this university. At the beginning of the reform and opening up, education was a scarce resource. In Wenzhou, when there were only two ordinary colleges, Wenzhou Medical College and the Wenzhou Normal College. In the Conference on Higher Education held by the government of Zhejiang Province in 1984, the Provincial Education Commission suggested that Wenzhou establish Wenzhou colleges and universities in order to meet demand for talents in Wenzhou's reform and opening up and economic construction. In its reply of agreement to establish the Wenzhou University, the provincial government clearly pointed out that the construction should be mainly self-funded by the local government. Self-funded. 自筹经费，自筹经费。At the initial stage of preparation, capital was a big problem. The preparatory group of Wenzhou University proposed to collect money from the people in the form of lottery, and thus was born the 3 yuan voucher for construction of Wenzhou University. In 1985, the 3 yuan voucher of Wenzhou University was issued, quickly setting off an upsurge of the subscribing for the 3 yuan voucher through the city to support the construction of Wenzhou University. Voucher, 券 3元券 3元券 According to the statistic, the fund raised through the 3 yuan voucher totaled nearly 2.5 million yuan, which promoted personal donations of 1.04 million yuan and overseas Chinese donations of 4.03 million yuan. Infrastructure funds of 2.4 million yuan allocated by the provincial government, and another 1.55 million yuan granted by the municipal government. 10 million yuan was raised from various sources, ensuring the smooth completion of 40,000 square meters of school buildings in the first phase of the construction project. At the gate of Xueyuan Road campus of Wenzhou University stand 3 pillars, which memorize the 3 forces of the establishment of this university: government funding, social fundraising, overseas Chinese donations, and the people's expectation for this development of higher education in Wenzhou. Wenzhou University, a multi-source funded university, has incubated many higher education institutions for Wenzhou, such as Wenzhou College of Commerce, Wenzhou Ken University, and Wenzhou University of Science and Technology in the following 30 years, cultivating numerous talents. As we can see, the story of Wenzhou education is related to Wenzhou sages, international friends, and ordinary people, and the story is far from over. In the middle of the COVID pandemic, we spent the cold winter together here, with Chinese as the bridge. With all my heart, I hope that friends from all over the world will come to Wenzhou one day and write your own stories with the city. Before leaving, let's review some new words we learned today. 使命，使命，历史使命，历史使命，延续，延续，荣光，荣光，复兴， 复兴，资本，资本，崛起，崛起，专家，专家，经世致用，经世致用，重拾，重拾，重伤，重伤，示威，示威，传教士，传教士，天赋，天赋，牛津，牛津，方言，方言，圣经，圣经，私塾，私塾，海关，海关，筹款，筹款，冷战，冷战，自筹，自筹。And that's all for today's course. Thank you. Bye.